So that was kind of a key theme and identity, as we heard in this area, we like that country open space living. So these were just some general statistics that we thought were pretty interesting that helped guide this conversation. About 68% of people, 69% said that it was important to attract commercial and industrial development. What was very interesting is that the types of industrial and commercial development varies drastically. What this question was saying, do we need it? Is it important? And about 70% said, yes, it is. But later in the survey, what you'll see is that while people say it's important that we attract it, a lot of people did not want industrial development in this area. So you kind of have this difficulty where people say, we do need it, but we don't want it by us. And that makes it difficult because as a plan, to plan for the future, you have to say, well, we know that nobody wants it, but where can we put it to keep that growth? Where can we put industrial to make sure that people are having jobs, that we're attracting new businesses into this area so Vermillion and the local businesses can continue to grow, the population can continue to grow. So that wasn't too surprising. We see that in a lot of places, but it's still worth mentioning. People understand that there is a need for these businesses, even though they might not want it close to them. In addition, overwhelming people said that they like parks and open space. About 75% of people that responded said that preservation of parks, building new parks, and keeping that open space within that area of the joint jurisdiction was very important. So again, this is all guiding these conversations to say, what do we want this area to look like going forward for future development? So when we asked more specific questions, we got down to more specific land uses. Once, parks and open space. You're going to see that as a theme throughout this whole thing. People like parks. People want parks. It's desirable. If we bring more parks, or if residential development comes in and they have parks, it's more attractive. Value goes up. People are interested in living. Sorry, I move my hands around a lot. I keep hitting the mic. It makes it more interesting for people. In addition, as you guys know, the areas outside of Vermillion aren't quite city. The farther outside of Vermillion you get, the more ag land you get, and the more people say we want to keep this ag. Again, that is not surprising at all. I want to emphasize, anytime we talk about one of these plans, this is not saying that you have to sell your land. This is not telling any person that lives in this area that they have to develop, that they have to sell, that they're going to be forcefully annexed into the city. This is just saying, hey, in 20, 30, 40 years, if someone does want to sell that land, if someone does want to start talking to developers, we can kind of say, hey, this is what we envision this area looking like. So it guides those developers to say, hey, if we're going to put commercial in, we should look in this area. If we want to put industrial in, we should look at this area. So it's meant more as a helping tool as opposed to saying, hey, you watch out, we're coming for your land. That's not what this is. As I mentioned, people wanted to avoid industrial even though they said that there was a need to attract new industrial. And for the just right, where people said we like the progress that we're making, a lot of people said residential development and commercial development, that they felt that we were at a good pace. Not that we wanted to spend more energy in there, but we were spending a good amount of energy to those land uses. So just as a general summary, there was a lack of multifamily housing that people mentioned in the joint jurisdiction area. Multifamily housing can be apartments, twin homes, anything like that. However, even though people said that there was a lack in apartment and multifamily housing, a lot of people listed it as undesirable, that they didn't want to see more multifamily housing within the joint jurisdiction area. We see that in a lot of places. A lot of people want single-family homes, they want the neighborhoods, and a lot of times people have in their minds what an apartment might look like. When we didn't do this here, but for other locations, when we talked to the public and showed them actual examples of different styles of apartments, what you ended up noticing is that people weren't against multifamily housing, they were against the exterior look of multifamily housing. And we talked about this as a subcommittee, but one of the things that can be done in those areas to make them more attractive is just talking about what that outside exterior of the building can look like while still making it affordable. Because if you have a building that looks nice, more people are going to say, hey, yeah, we're fine if that goes up in there, next to our neighborhood. So that's just something that we kind of talked about where people might not like it, but there's something that can be done to bring it in. In addition, there was a lot of mixed feelings on light industry. It was very interesting because there was as many people that said it was very undesirable in the JJZA as the amount of people that said it was very undesirable. So you had very desirable and very undesirable both at the same amount of people. And that just shows there's a very strong feeling about where that stuff can go. So after all these conversations, the comprehensive plan talks about goals. It talks about policies that can be implemented, ways that we can meet the needs of the people in that area. The main focus of this comprehensive plan, though, is the future land use map. As I mentioned before, this is kind of the guiding for future development in the area. What this isn't is this is not a zoning map. A lot of people see the colors and think this is zoning. It's not. Zoning says this is what it's currently zoned as and what you can build right now. The future land use map says in the future. If it's farmland, what do we see that turning into in the future? Do we see that as residential? Do we see that as industrial? Where do we want to guide that development in the future? So this isn't changing anybody's current use. Anybody that owns a farm, this isn't saying you're now going to be industrial. It's not saying you're now residential development. It's just saying in the future, if someone wants to approach you for the land, these are the uses that as a subcommittee we've looked at and said this is where we envision it being. What I can show you, if you can see the mouse, you're going to see some area that's kind of two colors. It's both yellow and red. The colors are a little bit different up here, but those are areas where the subcommittee sat down and said, you know what, we can see this being single family, or sorry, not single family, we can see this being residential, or we can see it being commercial use. But we're not sure right now, and we don't want to hinder development on any of those, so we're going to say for future land use, it could be either one. This type of plan can always be amended, the future land use. The idea is if we categorize some of these as both commercial and residential, as some parts start to develop, we can come back as a committee and say, now that we see where the development is starting, now we can get more specific and what the uses are around that area. But right now, there was nothing that wanted to prevent either commercial or residential development in those locations. The colors are, like I said, the colors look just slightly different. This is supposed to be purple, but I think it's more of a blue on here. This is industrial. These are locations that we sat down and said, where are the residential facilities, where's commercial, where can we keep industrial, where it's causing the least amount of impact on residential areas, but still allowing people to travel and commute to those locations so it's not just completely on the outskirts anywhere. So all the other grayed out areas on the outskirts, those are what's considered future growth reserves. What future growth reserve is it's basically saying you're agricultural and you're going to stay, we see you staying ag for the next 20, 30 years until development starts to move closer to you. And then at that time, we'll look at the map again and say, are we still thinking it's going to be ag or what should go in there at that point? So finally, what exactly did we do? The future land use was the main portion, but what we did is we established different goals. We heard from people what they want in that residential development, that commercial development, all that type of stuff. So what we looked at is what were the main takeaways to make sure that as we're making zoning regulations in this joint area, what is it that should be guiding those decisions? What should be guiding our Board of Commissioners, city councilors in that joint jurisdiction to say, you know, these are what the regulations are going to be. So we wanted, overwhelmingly, we heard single family was positive. So we want to make sure that we're promoting single family detached neighborhoods in the areas. In addition, with those single family developments, we want to make sure that we're integrating parks, that we're having open spaces, that we're allowing bike paths and trails and different things where families can go out, walk their kids, feel safe, where they can go to different areas of commercial, possibly industrial, you know, riding their bike to work. Those were important. We want to make sure that those goals are listed so that we don't lose sight over the next 20 years of what the public wanted for those areas. For commercial, we wanted to provide attractive businesses. That brings a lot of different commercial aspects to Vermillion in the joint jurisdiction area. As I mentioned, similar to single family, or similar to apartments, people want it to look nice. That's always one of the key things that we hear. You don't want a cheap building going up, you know, where it's just, you know, 4 walls and a tin roof. A lot of people want that to just look nice in their neighborhood so they feel like their property values increase. In addition, multimodal movements to commercial. Multimodal movements just means many ways to travel to those locations. So again, bike paths, walking paths, being able to get to these commercial places besides just having a car. We want to make it so that it's really accommodating to everybody. For industrial, we noticed that it is important to have industrial development in this area. So we wanted to provide diverse employment opportunities and try to attract different types of industry to get a wide range of workers that could come into Vermillion and live in Vermillion. In addition, we want to guide a lot of those high-profile businesses to areas where it's easily accessible to the highway, so that they have an opportunity to, if they need semis or anything like that, they could hop on the bypass, hop on 50, get whatever it is that they're transporting out as quickly as possible and without hindering any type of residential neighborhoods. And then finally, future growth reserves, as I mentioned before, maintaining that rural lifestyle. So the last thing that we did after we kind of said these are our pathways, we develop planning strategies. These are the things that we're going to be talking about as they develop regulations or whenever regulations might be coming down the line or anything like that. Always at the forefront is the health and safety of citizens. Every regulation that's created, we're wanting to make sure that people are safe, that people are healthy. We want to support municipal expansion. There's a lot of things about municipal expansion. If growth happens too quickly in the area, but the city's not expanding, that could cause issues with the city not making enough in taxes from residents that they can't pay for services, roadways, anything like that. So the idea is making sure that we're growing, but that the city has what it needs to expand its city limits whenever the time is right. As I mentioned before, it's not forcing anybody to annex. What I understand is from Vermillion, I don't work for Vermillion, but Vermillion generally only wants voluntary annexations where people come to them and say, we want to join the city. They have not been doing or are doing any type of involuntary where the city has to do a large step-by-step procedure that's outlined in state law that says we have to do like an annexation study, then we have to do a petition, all that kind of stuff. From what I understand, Vermillion's not doing that. So we're only looking at voluntary. Again, there's nothing in this that's going to force anybody to join the city or sell their land. So yeah, that's just, I wanted to leave time for questions because I know that this is a lot of information and there's a lot of different things for the plan. Are there any? Yes.
So generally I think I understand this, but if you can help me better understand what the dynamic is and then how it goes from this committee to actually being a zoning rule. Because if I'm looking at the makeup of the committee, there's an elected official from each city and county, and then I think the rest are appointed or volunteers or something to that degree. And then you use the word envision, and I like hearing it that way. You envision this type of outcome, but how does that vision from the committee become hey, landowner, you want to sell your thing, your buyer can only be trying to do X in that land, and that's an official zoning rule then?
That's a great question. So let me move back to that committee. So right now, we have that subcommittee where it's made up of people on the planning commissions for both the city and the county, and then the county commission, and then the city council. So right now, we are just kind of an advisory group. There are a lot of people on the planning commissions for both the county and the city, and then there are a lot of people on the city council and the board of commissioners that if we had everybody meet together, we would have 40 people in a room kind of talking about it. So right now in the small subcommittee, we're figuring out what it is that we want that's in the plan, hearing people. The next steps, once we have a plan and we get public input, is going to be taking that to the joint commissions. So there'll be a joint meeting where we present the draft. Again, right now we're working on the draft, but we'll have a joint meeting with the planning commissions. So the county's planning commission and the city's planning commission will present a draft to get their feedback. It's an open meeting, public's invited to go into that. Then we'll take it to the joint councils. So we'll be the city council, board of commissioners at the same meeting, present, again, open meeting, people can attend that, provide feedback, and then we'll get feedback from them. Then we take it back to the commission, or take it back to the subcommittee, make changes, and then when we finally go through the approval process, it'll be a public hearing. So at the drafts, it's just open meeting. We're giving it as a presentation informational. Once it goes to be adopted, it'll be a public hearing for both joint commissions, so there'll be notices in the newspaper for the people to get out. Right now, this is a vision. This acts as the justification for any type of decision that the councils make, and that means for regulations. So what we say here is we say these are the general overarching goals that we all agree to. We've heard the public's opinion. They want, bike paths, they want trails, they want single family. This is kind of what people want. So then what happens is we take this comprehensive plan and then we look at those actual zoning regulations, because this justifies those zoning regulations. So and a long process later, generally we would likely come back with a subcommittee and review those zoning regulations, which is what you're talking about. How do we get to like the actual enforcements of portions? In terms of selling the land or talking to developers, this is a living document. I know you probably hear living document a lot with a lot of things, but it truly is a living document. Things change fast in the development world. You could go from absolutely no development to fast development. So as soon as things start occurring, that's generally like if you start to see things growing in that joint jurisdiction area or annexations occurring, generally that subcommittee will meet together and say, do we need to change, what this zoning is, what this future land use is. And that's when we would go back to the public. We would say, these are some changes that have happened, do some more meetings trying to get public input on where those uses would be. So if a person wants to sell their land, if a person's coming and saying, we want it to be industrial, but the future land use is residential, you would have to go through that joint committee process because it's in the JJZA to get it. But it doesn't mean right now with this future land use that that's permanent, because things do change. So if we see that there's a new development in the next 3 or 4 years where people are moving and we're like, hey, this area might be a good spot for industrial, we need to get back together and kind of look at where it goes. That's something that could always occur. Does that answer your question a little bit, or is there any part that you want me to clarify? Or?
No, I think you touched on it without saying it directly. Ultimately, there are parts of, or there's a combined group of county and city
yes.
elected officials that get together after all the inputs and hearings, vote on any rule changes and say, yep, here's where we are today.
That's exactly what it is. And
I think just like as an example, like if you own land in the JJZA that you have it's your family home or your family farm, you've decided to sell it to somebody, they don't want it to be a farm anymore, they want to build a factory there, but the comprehensive plan says we are not putting factories here. When that comes to the joint planning commission, they'll say, I don't think we want to rezone that because that's not part of our comprehensive plan. So it's not necessarily that they are changing the zoning now, it's that when they're asked to change the zoning, these are the kinds of things that they're going to look at. So it's what their reference is, it's not necessarily what they are actively doing. The owners of the land are going to be the ones that are actively doing it, but they're going to have to ask for changes, and those changes are going to be guided by a comprehensive plan.
yeah, it's a general guiding document. So in that joint jurisdiction area, you have to see both boards. You have to see both the people from the city and then both the people from the county.
And also like how they build roads or do infrastructure. So for example, if they think something's going to be more residential, they might be doing a different kind of road and water planning than if they thought it was going to be an industrial area. That's happened a lot in Vermillion, where the size of pipes or the width of road is based on our comprehensive plan and where we see commercial growth going versus residential. And so it guides those decisions too. But it's not necessarily a one-to-one on zoning.
Yep. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, so was there a recent trigger where this started happening in the joint jurisdiction, or what does this happen around, the cities and counties intermittently, or does this develop, or how did you get involved?
So, good question. So this started in Vermillion, Clay County back in 2010, where they got together. States mandate comprehensive plans. Generally, the comprehensive plans go about 20 years out. If it was looked at in 2010, it's now 2024, so we figured we started in about 2023, so we figured, hey, it's probably about time for us to get together, talk about the comprehensive plan, and kind of start going through the update. In terms of joint jurisdiction throughout the state, that's a very good question, and it really does vary. There's a couple of different jurisdictions. A lot of it happens with places that might start seeing development where they think it's good to have those communications. Sioux Falls has joint jurisdiction with both Minnehaha County and Lincoln County. Minnehaha County also has joint jurisdiction with Del Rapids. But there are some other places where there might not be as much development, and they're not expecting too much development, that they feel like, hey, it's okay that we don't have this joint jurisdiction because we have good communication, and we're not going to see too much occurring in those areas. Now, for the ones that don't have that joint jurisdiction, there's still a lot of other technical things that occur behind the scenes. Cities have what's called subdivision rights, where they can go outside or 3 miles outside of city limits for subdivisions if they have subdivision ordinances. So that kind of gives them an impact on how they want to see development if they don't have a joint jurisdiction. A lot of counties in their own comprehensive plan, they won't have joint jurisdiction, but they'll have that future land use as like something that's classified as like city growth area, and it'll just be shaded city growth, because generally if something grows in there, this county's going to go and talk to the city about it. The benefits of the joint jurisdiction is that everybody talks to each other, they hear these issues in front of each other, and they can come to a consensus as a group to address those issues. So it just varies. Anything else? Yes, Rich.
Well, one of the other issues that we, the Joint Jurisdictional Committee, is doing is not to penalize people in joint jurisdiction, but make it as easy as possible for them to sell or use the land the way they wish. It matches both the city and the county. So that's equally as important as establishing the rules.
Exactly, and that's a great point. When we address this, we want to make it easier for development while still realizing that there's specific growth that's good and planned. So the whole point of that future land use, like Rich was saying, is we want to promote that development. We want to make sure that people can use that area for how they want to. That benefits both the county and the city, because whenever we grow together, it benefits both. So that was a key guiding conversation when we talked about all this stuff. So very good point. Yes?
I was just looking at your list there. How many of the members are actual county residents or live outside the city where they would affect the rural interests of their own?
I was going to say, that's a good question. I haven't asked them where they live. I'm not sure they'll want to provide me that because I'll bother them all the time. But yeah, I don't, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to how many people live in that joint jurisdiction area that serve on this board.
I own property in joint jurisdiction. That's where I have a building out there that's in the area that's zoned industrial. In fact, my area in Barn Construction, I have a building there. Barn Construction's right next to me, 317th Street here in Saba. And the Saba is actually, their new building is behind my place. And so it's, I have a little island of joint jurisdiction that's my property and Mark Brothers' property. It's within the confines of city limits, but we're outside of city limits because we have not been annexed yet.
You like the Vatican?
Yes, I like that. Yes. They're in Italy, but not part of Italy. Yes.
But you did bring up a good point. We really did make a concerted effort to hear about the people from that joint jurisdiction area as we were doing public outreach. That's why we sent like little postcards to people directly in that area. We tried to get it on social media, put it in the newspaper for anybody in the county or the city to respond, but we really put specific outreach to people in those areas so we could get that feedback, because any decisions we make are going to directly impact them going forward. So we made a concerted effort to hear about it. I do want to just mention, if you did receive a postcard for the for the open houses we've had the past couple weeks. There was an issue, we gave it to the mail people like 2 weeks before an August 6th open house, and the day before, Drew from Clay County received an email or phone call that basically said, hey, we forgot to send it out, and he immediately messaged me and was like, we didn't send out, like the postcards weren't sent out from the place. So we already put it in, different ads and social media, so we still held it, but there might have been people in that joint jurisdiction area that didn't get notice of that open house for a night or for an evening portion. So we had one on the 20th during the day. But what we're planning on doing, because there was a mistake where they didn't send it out, we're going to be rescheduling an open house in the evening in September. We're going to focus on a date and then get other postcards sent out, so that way we can get people that might have not been able to attend a noon meeting because they have work, giving them the chance to come out for a 6 o'clock meeting sometime in September and give their feedback.
And to clarify on that too, Cindy Hegyi, she's a resident of the county. She lives out on Greenfield Road. And Marty Gilderson lives in town, but he owns extensive property out in the county. I think I'm the only one on this list that actually owns property within joint jurisdiction, so I feel real special.
Well, if you guys have any questions or anything else, feel free to stop by and chat with me at the end of this meeting. But thank you for letting me talk to you about some really boring zoning stuff. I appreciate it. So thank you, guys.
All right. So thank you, Sean, and thank you, Mark, for doing Sergeant at Arms, and to our guests, Emily and Dick.